welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've got a special guest with me. I am talking today with Mistress Magpie. Hello, Mistress.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you so much for being on Let's Talk Bitcoin today. You got in touch with us through the Let's Talk Bitcoin website because I guess you were listening to the show and you heard a discussion of Bitcoin and pro-doms, which is what you are. Is that right?
Actually, I haven't heard that particular discussion on your show.
Oh.
I actually found your show through the Bitcoin Talk forum because I've become extremely interested in Bitcoin, and I thought that I would drop you a line. So I'll definitely be catching up on that show in the next few days.
Oh, great. Well, that's a nice coincidence. So you are interested in Bitcoin, and what do you call yourself? A dominatrix, a pro-dom?
Either is fine. Pro-dom, professional, mistress, dominatrix, sex worker, any of those terms are just fine by me.
Okay. And you are based out of the UK, but you don't sound like you have a British accent.
Indeed, I'm based in Plymouth, in Devon, in the UK. I'm an American by origin. I've been here about 8 years now.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So I guess the first question I have for you is, how did you get interested in Bitcoin? Like, how did you first find out about it?
I actually found out about Bitcoin just when it was coming up, being a very nerdy kind of a person and interested in cryptology and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I did not get into Bitcoin at the inception of the currency, and I remembered Bitcoin when the big article came out about the gentleman who found lots of forgotten Bitcoins on his computer and bought a flat with some of them. So I hadn't been working in sex work when I first heard of Bitcoin, but when I was reminded of its existence, I thought, hey, this would be a great currency for sex workers to use because it's an anonymous currency and it has many of the advantages of cash, except for it can be sent remotely. So I thought it would be great for myself and for my clients.
Great. So what was the time frame? Like when was that you were first looking into Bitcoin?
It was probably 4 or 5 years ago, whenever it was starting up.
Really? Oh, that's really early.
Yeah, it was. And I was like, okay, this is kind of a cool idea. I had been curious about e-gold before that, and that never really went anywhere. And I just sort of threw this into the dustbin of my head saying, oh, wow, this is another little venture online that's never going to go anywhere. And boy, was I wrong.
Wow. Well, I'm impressed that you were really early on, at least with the idea of Bitcoin, and you saw some potential usefulness in it right away.
Yeah. Initially, of course, a few years ago, I wasn't involved in sex work, and my interest in Bitcoin was really, political and economic. The idea of a stateless currency is so important for freedom and civil liberties. So just as a bit of an activist my whole life, that's my initial interest. This time, coming back this year, my interest is still that, but also this more direct interest professionally as a sex worker.
Yeah, so you would consider yourself a person who's interested in freedom and liberty, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in freedom and liberty, but I'm coming at it from a left-wing perspective. So activists, people who are organizing for social change, one of the ways that they can be monitored and tracked is with their financial transactions. So if they're doing that sort of thing with Bitcoin, and more importantly, if the entire world is using Bitcoin, then that confers a profound freedom on everybody, because the economy is how you live your whole life, right? So if you're doing anything from buying fetish gear to organizing a website for a dissident in China, Bitcoin is going to help you out there by protecting your anonymity.
Yeah, right on. So, okay, how did you get interested in, I guess, like the BDSM community, or how did you get into your current line of work?
Well, that's actually two distinct questions. I've been involved in the BDSM community since I was about 19 years old. I'm 34 now, and it's always been a hobby and interest of mine. In terms of my work, in terms of doing BDSM professionally, I started thinking about that last year in 2012 because I'd been doing phone sex and stuff like that. And basically, I was in the southwest of the United Kingdom, where I still am. The economy's depressed, and I was having trouble finding steady work. So I picked this work up. And then I realized, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this. Why don't I stop doing it on the phone and just start doing it in person? When I moved to Plymouth, my partner David had a lot of excellent BDSM kit, and I thought, why don't we put this kit to work? And so we started using the front room of our shared flat as my studio or my dungeon.
Wow. So had you ever been self-employed before that?
Well, a little bit of self-employment with web design, tech support, and of course the phone sex stuff as well. That was all independent contract work, although it was served through a website. But in terms of really putting in the fanatical amount of time that you have to put into developing a business and getting that sort of excitement and momentum, yeah, Mistress Magpie has been my first real full-fledged business.
There was a joke in there somewhere about nobody's cracking the whip but you, so.
Exactly. Nobody's cracking the whip but me. I'm my own boss, and I like being the boss, and other various little cracks like that. But definitely, I am a bit of a control freak, and running my own business is a good thing for me.
Yeah. So do you accept Bitcoins in your business?
Yes, I do. I accept Bitcoins in my business either at the point of sale. So if somebody's coming in, I can show them my QR code, or I can show them a paper printout Bitcoin code that they can scan and pay me then, or they can pay me in advance. It's also a good screening tool for deposits. Sometimes if I get somebody on the phone and they want to have a booking, have a session, I will ask them to give a very small deposit. And before I started doing this with Bitcoin, they would have to use Amazon gift certificates or PayPal, or to go to the newsagent and do a top-up to a mobile phone. And that all takes a lot of time and effort. And with PayPal, of course, your personal details and even your address can be disclosed. So for a lot of my clients, that wasn't a workable solution for them. But if they can send me that deposit with Bitcoin, that's great, because I get my deposit, which secures their booking, and then I know they're going to show up. But they also don't have to give me their real name or anything like that. And that's really important for their discretion because, of course, it's sex work, and discretion is very important.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It sounds like it's a win-win for both parties. So, what do you do in a typical session? I know there's no typical, but how long would a session with a client be, and what are some things that might go on?
BDSM session can involve a huge amount of activities. It can be sort of the stereotypical thing where I'll strip somebody's clothes off and give them a spanking over my knee, but it also can involve role play. I've got a lot of people who come in who want to have a role play of a stern headmistress, or a nurse, or a school nurse, or something like that, or even a domineering aunt. They'll have a scenario that they want to recreate and explore, and maybe something that has been traumatic in their past is going to turn into something really cathartic and uplifting for the client. There's also the whole definition of a session is not necessarily what I'm doing. A lot of my clients want to have sort of an ongoing relationship with the mistress. So, for instance, a client might be into chastity, where a male client will have a chastity device secured on their genitals, and I would control when that device was unlocked or locked up. And that person, I might only see them once a month or twice a month, but there will be an ongoing interaction with me and that client. It can really involve lots of different things, and that's why I insist on talking to my clients via voice, because it just gets really complicated really fast otherwise, and you need to sort of connect with each other and hash out what it is that we're going to do together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for telling us about that. Wondering, what are the laws where you are, and like, have you ever had any legal issues or legal problems with the kind of business that you're in?
The laws are actually really good for mistresses in the United Kingdom. There's a distinction between an escort and a mistress. For an escort, a client might have sex with them, and that doesn't happen with me. A client doesn't have any kind of sex with me. It's more of a BDSM or a kink experience than it is a strictly sexual experience, although it can be quite sensual. So the clients associating with me, everything is totally legal, totally above board, and I comply with all the UK laws.
Okay. So one of the reasons I could envision that perhaps somebody might be interested in using Bitcoin if they're in the sex work industry is because it could help you potentially get around certain laws that, somebody might be doing things in their jurisdiction that aren't allowed by the politicians. Do you think that might be the case for other people?
In terms of circumventing the laws with Bitcoin, that's not something I've ever particularly explored. I know in the United States, BDS is a varying level of legal depending on what jurisdiction you're in. And of course, Bitcoin might be used for those sorts of transactions. But I really am trying to encourage people to see Bitcoin as a legitimate and legal currency. The reason it's good for me and my clients isn't because anything we're doing is illegal, but it protects our anonymity and it protects my security as a business user. If somebody wanted to pay me all of their session fee in advance in PayPal, I might wrinkle my nose at that a little bit because you can get a charge back and the money can be stuck back in their account. I've got fees and everything else. But with Bitcoin, of course, that's not going to happen. So I get that added level of security. But in terms of circumventing the law with Bitcoin, that's not something I really know anything about.
Yeah, I got you right on. So when did you start accepting Bitcoin at your business? And I guess is it popular? Like, what percentage of your clients might pay you in Bitcoin?
I've only started accepting Bitcoin in my business in the last few weeks. I've actually found that there are very few clients that I have existing that are interested in Bitcoin, although it is something I will chat about as, a session's over and they're getting ready to go on with their day. In terms of new clients, when I ask for a deposit, I always mention Bitcoin as an option. Most of the Bitcoin transactions I've been getting have actually been tips. There's a wonderful tip culture with Bitcoin, and I've been going on Reddit. There's a little subreddit called Girls Gone Bitcoin, and I've been sticking pictures up there, and I've gotten quite a few tips from that. So it's really kind of cool because I've got two parallel income streams going on. I've got my pound sterling income stream, which is the sort of face-to-face stuff, and then I'm producing, smutty pictures and sticking them on the internet, and I'm getting Bitcoin for that. And that's great because I'm not taking time away from work I would be getting sterling for to earn some Bitcoin. I've got the two streams going on in parallel there. So that's good for me.
Yeah, it's almost like a passive income element to it, right? Because once you take those pictures, they're there forever.
It is a passive income element. Unfortunately, I've not been able to capitalize yet very well on that. The subreddit where I post is basically the only place I can find where there's people generating content, adult content for Bitcoin, and there's just not a lot of transaction going on. I've also looked on Bitcoin Talk forum, and I've seen there's a couple of cam sites, but they seem to be empty all the time. So right now, I'm really interested in researching a sort of porn platform where people are producing videos, producing photos and stuff like that, and people are paying them for that stuff in Bitcoin. I think that economy is a very new one, and I would like to get in on the ground floor of that. I would really like there to be a community where there are people producing this stuff, bespoke stuff for clients. They can make requests. And all of this commerce is going on in Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it might even, I could envision a scenario in which a sex worker transitions from working in the physical world with clients to working online with clients. And when you're working online, you could potentially have a situation where they have to prepay up front. And if any funny business goes on, then you can just shut off the stream and you don't have to worry about them physically violating any boundaries or whatever because they're not in the same room with you.
That's an interesting way of putting it. In terms of my work, I equally like the remote work that I do and the in-person work. When I'm doing my job in person, when somebody's coming to my studio and having a session with me, I've always got security available in another room and I'm safe. So I've never really worried about somebody violating my boundaries. It's really a very safe job. So I wouldn't see myself transitioning from in-person work to remote work as if one was somehow better than the other. However, that is definitely not the case for all sex workers. There's a lot of independent escorts and other types of sex worker who have that problem. And also the fact that they're carrying a lot of cash can be a danger to them because it sets them up for being a target of thieves. So that's another really great reason to support Bitcoin, because if the customers and the providers are using Bitcoin, that gives them that additional layer of security, especially if they're using paper wallets.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I appreciate that. I didn't mean to imply that all sex work is dangerous or anything like that, but it definitely opens up a lot of possibilities when you're using Bitcoin and working for yourself in that field.
It does. Another sort of benefit to it, and putting my activist hat on, is it really encourages independent sex workers as opposed to women who may have been trafficked or controlled by pimps, because if they are taking funds and putting them directly into their Bitcoin wallet, they have a little bit more control over where that money's going, whereas a pimp could just take half of the money or even all of the money if it was being given to the provider in cash. Of course, there are still problems with providers receiving Bitcoin because a lot of times pimps or people who are controlling trafficked women have their claws in really deep, and those women are going to give them the cut even if it's in Bitcoin, but it still gives them a little bit more control in that situation.
So when you're working with clients and you know that somebody may want to pay in Bitcoin, do you give them any extra incentive? Like, do you offer a discount for Bitcoin, or do you mark up your US dollar prices to compensate for, like, basically how easy it is to use Bitcoin compared to those other methods?
I actually offer a £20 discount for anybody who wants to pay me in Bitcoin for an hour. So, my fee is £120 an hour at present. So if somebody wants to pay me in Bitcoin, then they can pay me £100 worth of Bitcoin at whatever the exchange rate is for that day. And that gives them an incentive because Bitcoin's really valuable and a lot of people don't want to get rid of their Bitcoin. And it also is perfectly fine by me because I really believe in Bitcoin as a currency. I'm bullish about it, believe it's going to continue to go up. So I'm very happy to receive £100 value of Bitcoin instead of £120 of sterling, of fiat money, as it's so called.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And what about the dollars, or I guess not dollars, but the fiat
pounds,
money, the pounds, that you receive for your work? Are you like buying Bitcoin with them? Are you converting it, or are you only basically buying Bitcoin with your time and energy?
At this point in time, I'm not actually converting any pound sterling into Bitcoin. I'm enjoying the psychological experiment of creating value out of nothing. Well, it's not nothing. It's my time, effort, and creativity, but without putting any fiat money and actually making value. directly out of my labor, the sweat of my brow, and creating Bitcoin with it. And I've got a large growing Bitcoin wallet. I've paid for some stuff Christmas with it. Oh yes, I had my first face-to-face non-work Bitcoin transaction yesterday.
Oh.
Basically, one of my submissives, Bunny, was over at the house, and I got a friend named Dante phoning me up, and he had some gig tickets that I wanted, but I didn't have any cash. I didn't feel like going to the bank. Bunny had some fiat currency, and I had some Bitcoin. He had a Bitcoin wallet, so I gave him 25 pounds worth of Bitcoin. He gave me 25 pounds of sterling. And then I took that money and I paid that to Dante for my gig tickets. So there you go. It's kind of cool.
That's great. Yeah, it's bringing it really full circle.
Mm-hmm. And I was very excited about it as well. I ran and told David, my partner, I've just done a non-work Bitcoin transaction. I was very excited.
Cool. So I've heard it proposed, and I don't know of anybody who's actually doing this at any point. I don't know of anybody who's doing this yet, but I've heard the idea floated around that potentially people who offer services, like whatever the service be, maybe massage or BDSM kind of scene services or anything that they could really think, house cleaning, whatever.
Sure, any kind of service, yeah.
Yeah, could list the service on local Bitcoins, and then people could pay them in Bitcoins for the service, and it would also be a way to advertise. And in that way, that local Bitcoins could almost turn into a platform that's similar to something like Craigslist. I don't know if Craigslist is big in the UK, but it is here, and that's how a lot of people hook up for certain services. So is that something you'd be interested in? Have you ever used local Bitcoins before?
I've just actually been looking into local Bitcoin today because a member of Bitcoin Talk forum is writing a sex worker's guide to local Bitcoin. So I've just had a look at it, and it looks kind of cool. It's definitely something I would use as an advertising platform. I'm going to have to study it a little bit more first. Websites like Craigslist and Gumtree, which is sort of a similar thing to Craigslist, are used here in the UK. And what really, really needs to happen is that those sites need to start supporting Bitcoin, like having Bitcoin QR codes on them for people or something like that, making it easy to plug in from the mainstream good and service sites into Bitcoin instead of corralling our trading into a little Bitcoin ghetto.
Right. Now, speaking of the Bitcoin forums, I'm really curious about something, and that is basically what your experience has been like as a woman who is clearly, women are at this point the minority in the Bitcoin community. And the Bitcoin Talk forum has been described by some people as a place that may not be always super friendly to women. So, what has your experience been like being in the Bitcoin community, especially from such an early time where you were on the forums 5 years ago?
I wasn't on the forums 5 years ago. I was just reading about Bitcoin passively through internet searches and things like that. I think the first place I heard about Bitcoin was Slashdot or somewhere like that. I've only been on the Bitcoin forum, Bitcoin Talk, for a few weeks. However, I've been welcomed there quite a lot. I've posted a couple of threads discussing my interest in using Bitcoin for work, and I've gotten a lot of support. I've also talked about this sort of economic gap, this hole in the economy where there's no self-created adult content site for Bitcoin that's really got a big user base, and people there have been really good sort of answering that question. People have been really good on Reddit as well, talking to me about this stuff. There's really been very few instances of sexism or anything like that. People have made a few like one or two people, not a lot of people, have made a few offhand comments about my appearance or something like that. No one's ever had a complaint about my appearance. People like the way I look, people like my accent and so on. But there's always going to be a few haters on the internet. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, as they say. And when that mask is over their face, they might be a little bit rude, but I've got kind of a thick skin there. I think for women in general, it's really important for women in any kind of minority group on a forum or wherever in the real world to organize, to sort of link up and network with each other, and to give each other advice and support. So that's definitely something I'm interested in doing on Bitcoin Talk and elsewhere. I think a Bitcoin women's forum might be kind of a cool idea in future, and that's something I would definitely be interested in helping to develop.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That sounds like, overall it's been a really positive experience, and I'm glad to hear that. There's a lot of overlap between people who have maybe freedom-minded political views and a little bit of nerdiness to them, and people who read about things online like Bitcoin. And, the demographics of all of those tend to skew male sometimes. But there are women out there who are interested in Bitcoin. And like you said, it's great for us to meet each other and be able to share our experiences and kind of get to know each other without becoming like an exclusive club or anything like that. But, I want everybody to be able to use Bitcoin. So the more the merrier. Come on in, all types of people, everybody under the sun.
Yeah, thank you very much. Your wonderful response and welcome has been something I've experienced across the board. Everyone's been a little bit curious and had a few questions, but everybody's been really positive and welcoming, and it's just wonderful to be in this sort of early days of a new Bitcoin economy.
Yeah, absolutely. So one last question I have for you, and this is kind of a fun one.
Cool.
There's been a lot of people who have, maybe invested in Bitcoin or have worked for Bitcoin or whatever and acquired a bunch of Bitcoins. And now at this point, with the rising exchange rate of Bitcoin and fiat, they've become basically millionaires in terms of their fiat currency. And if you were to become a Bitcoin millionaire, maybe you already are, I don't know, but if you were to become a Bitcoin millionaire, would you still continue to do the work that you do?
Yes, I would definitely continue my work. I'm deeply, deeply involved in the BDSM community. I'm a lifestyle BDSM person, and I'm involved in various groups and organizations that help people to learn about BDSM and welcome new people. It's my passion as well as my profession. So even if, God willing, I become a Bitcoin millionaire-ess one day, I will still be around and people will still be able to come and see me.
Awesome. I love it. Anything else you want to add, Mistress Magpie?
I would like to add that I'm also a writer and a political activist, and I put lots of really sexy pictures online, especially on Reddit. And if you go to my website, mistressmagpie.com, you can learn a little bit more about me and how to get in touch with me. And you can also give me tips in Bitcoin. Christmas is coming and Mistress needs new stockings.
Indeed. Okay, so mistressmagpie.com, thank you so much for being a part of the show. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie here. Would you like to turn your book into an enthralling audiobook? Need a persuasive commercial to promote your company? How about a narrator for your explainer video? Here's where I can help. I'm a freelance voiceover artist, and since 2009, I've lent my voice to dozens of audio projects. To hear some examples of my work, check out my website, smvoice.info. If you like what you hear, I'd love to be the voice of your next project. Get in touch at smvoice.info.